Alrighty, and we are back. Welcome everybody, episode 80 of the Leonis Report. JB79 and I back again to talk about no news release quite yet, but we do know what's coming. But we got some fun topics to get through anyway, and we'll see what your Q&A has at the end as well. We love to interact with y'all, but get those questions ready before we get ahead of ourselves. Though, happy Monday. What's going on, man?
The usual kind of a busy work day on Monday, kind of catching up from the weekend, and then, pretty hectic usually for me on Monday nights because I have stuff going on with the family. But yeah, now it's time to relax. Now it's time to sit down, talk about the game, and yeah, very excited. We did jump the gun a little bit because we weren't sure exactly what was coming last week, so we kind of did talk a bit about Nichol and his VC. But yeah, that's we'll find ways to fill in the time. How
Definitely
about you?
so.
How was your weekend?
It was good, really busy. I was actually down in Connecticut with the girlfriend for her birthday weekend, and great eateries out there. Like we just ate all weekend and had a lot of fun, like drinks at night. And she's a big book nerd, as am I, and they have a lot of really great bookstores down there. And like I don't want to call them book fairs, but they're like used book, like barns. I don't even know how to describe it, but it's actually like a thing, like a thing you go do. And spent a lot of money on books. That was kind of cool, and that was it. Just enjoyed the weather. It's really warm here in New England in November, so we were walking around real easily, and it was a good time.
Yeah, it's been like a really like picture perfect fall so far. So yeah, the weather was great. Any hidden gems you found there at the bookstore while you were down there?
The book barn is one of them, and the way that works is basically an entirely used book barn, I guess, and everyone comes donates their books, and they have three different locations, and like outside they have like different like carts set up, and as you like walk through, it's like kind of a maze, and they have like a main area, and it's all very rustic. That's the cool thing about it is that as you walk through, like you're definitely feeling like you're in a like an old library. I found copies of books from like the 70s of like some of my favorite books that are like really nice, like old hardcovers, and girlfriend did too. And one of them has like
Nice.
a little like cat cafe, if you will, where there's like four or five different cats that hang out inside. So you just like chill and read a book, and it was very, very cool. Yeah.
That was like a big thing in Japan when I went there. They had like the cat cafe.
Yep.
Checked it out. It was actually pretty relaxing.
It is. It is. They had a lot of anime shops down there too. We went to like two or three different anime stores, and it wasn't just like manga and whatnot. They have a lot of actual like memorabilia. That there's just like everything from action figures and food from like Japan, like some of the snacks and whatnot. So my geek was having a good time there.
Sounds like it.
Yeah, but today's topic lineup, pretty straightforward, quite frankly. We will talk about Jayden, where at this time last week we did not have any of the actual details about him. We had some conjecture and theories around what was going to happen, but now we can actually talk about what we know, some of our initial impressions. We've built him and are using him in a variety of content, so we can talk a little bit to that. We will still talk about Nichol as a unit and the vision card, not to the level of depth we did last week because we did cover it kind of extensively, but we'll at least bring some stuff to the forefront that everyone should know. We got a great another segment here of hot takes where we'll put out four or five different statements that we feel like we've kind of heard in the community that are kind of controversial. Give some thoughts on them, see if we agree or disagree. We got some news on the MA3s over in Japan as well. Not necessarily brand new cutting edge, but we'll look at them, give a general consensus because a lot of people really weren't sure how much love are they going to give these units. They went out of order. It's not the same old way they're rolling them out. So we at least wanted to bring some visibility to that. We also got some quality of life updates we'll talk through. We'll do two little unique segments at the end too. We'll do a little bit of like a content creator Q&A where we'll talk through some of the behind the scenes stuff of what we do here in terms of equipment, software, creative process, and whatever you guys are curious about in the chat, we can answer as well. And then we have depending on time, given the light topic schedule, we have a fun little draft our own football team using only War of the Vision units. And so we have some really simplified fantasy football esque teams that we'll try to kind of go back and forth and see who can make the better football team using War of the Visions units. So haven't really done any prep for that. We'll see how that goes, but it sounded fun. But yeah,
It's timely because football season's in full swing here. So
exactly.
seemed like an interesting idea. I like it.
Yeah, it is. But before we get ahead of all of that, Jayden, the King of Conquest, that new missile ice unit. We've had a week now. He's just starting off in Arena today, as well as the bonus unit. And really cool fun fact about commanders. when you put the commanders in that slot and they're the bonus unit, they count as the full bonus percent. So I'm going to imagine a lot of teams this week might put Jayden in that commander slot and just use whatever team they want that can use the vision cards, which is actually kind of cool. That you're not forced to use the unit in actual gameplay. A lot of times you can like meta tune your teams based upon the bonus unit of the week, and it kind of changes a bit. But yeah, Jayden, what do you think about him?
To be honest, he's good. Yeah, I mean, I have some definite issues with him so far, where it's a lot of it though is like team building related, where I feel like the card picture is incomplete and the team building options aren't ideal at the moment. And I think that's a product of us getting him early. Like I can kind of think back to Black Rose, Helena, or young Helena rather,
Yeah,
when we got her last year, and people kind of were just using her in that basic light team with Elena and with Addison Ray, kind of a blast from the past. That team feels
yep.
like we've come so far since then. But like that was like a team that was being used for a good month until Vivi came in, and then obviously the Black Mage meta took off from there. So Helena, though, it was a different story in terms of her immediate impact. She felt like she was kind of came in, even though the team wasn't there yet, she was blowing people away already. Jayden isn't quite on that level of, he isn't distancing himself from the rest of the units like she did. And on the one hand, I think that's actually a good thing because we aren't power creeping again here with this anniversary. He's, to me, just like another good option, like a competitive option. And he's going to get better, as we kind of go into Final Fantasy X2. And, I'm sure they're going to put out a slew of vision cards that will amp him up even further.
Yeah, completely agree. He's a high quality unit. I gave my review and I felt bad because most of my character review I was talking about ways that he was missing the mark. And there's a lot of things you can talk to in terms of like missile reincarnations being subpar compared to other units. You can talk about the gun vision cards as you just mentioned, the team building difficulties where we don't have Una yet and you're kind of stuck to mono ice. Maybe a little bit of the water and ice overlap with the dark espers, but even then you got to have the right setup to make it work. That there's some actual like legit deficiencies in him. The whole debuff weakening thing with the move -1, and we've noticed some weird AI issues that if you have him in slot one, he won't always use the teammate buff unless you have a tank in the second slot with some initial hate. So there's some like weird complexities that don't make him a plug and play unit that Helena was or June was or even Sephiroth, Dark Sephiroth, some of these like anniversary meta movers, but he's still a great unit. I do still think that unit will make him much better. And I know I had some asterisks in my own review where there's a couple things I'm still waiting to see before I have a real consensus on my feelings. One of them is what's the vision card they come out for him next week? Because that vision card will determine, I think, a lot of where they plan on for that unit to go. If they give us three jobs, they clearly have those three jobs in mind of where they would like you to build that synergy with them. They could also make a simultaneous Esper release for him too, and maybe this is a cool amazing Esper that does something for him right now that solves some of these deficiencies that we're seeing. And the other thing too is maps. We don't talk about it as often, but Guild War maps, because that's our primary like emphasis on when we talk about characters, but really any maps, quick pick, arena. Most maps tend to not be as missile friendly as some others, where they're just not long enough. Maybe the topography isn't there. Maybe it's a little too wide open. And so I think just as easily as you could introduce a vision card or a new banger unit, I think even if the game just introduced some really missile friendly maps, all of a sudden you would see Jayden's value increase relative to some of these others. So there's a lot
So
of, yeah,
a perfect example of that is the arena map this week, which it was the map I think that back when Ice Alaya came out a couple of years ago. This was the map that was kind of around then,
it was.
and it's a very long map, and it's perfect for these missile units, especially gunner based ones, because there's no real height disparity in the middle of the map either to really throw them off. So yeah, you can kind of see exactly that range advantage on a map like this, and his range is very very solid when he gets his buff online.
Absolutely, yeah. He can get that range of four on all those abilities, and although he's that gun unit, so it is very much line of sight. I believe his 120 ability is actually trajectory based ability, so I think there is still some flexibility there for doing damage. But Yeah, I'm not blown away, but I think he's a solid unit. I think he's worth building around. I actually recommended not pulling him. I think for most people that I think you can probably wait, quite frankly, that I think 10-2 is more of an immediate need, considering that maybe Yuna is a must pull if you want to use Jayden. I kind of saw that, and that was a point in my own review where I'm like, I don't think Jayden is as oppressive without Yuna. She has a lot on her teammate buff and even in her utility where she's got a unit percent crush that he could really benefit from. When she has her teammate buff, hers is a haste dispel on hit, where you think about right now you're seeing Exia and the seal dispel and all the haste whatnot. That like that's a really powerful component to put next to him. Obviously the follow up damage. So like right now I think the picture is really incomplete, but I see the bones there for something good in the future.
100%. I think that's they're made to go together. The, all of the things that she brings to the table kind of coincide with what he has, especially when she removes both physical and magical reduction, or like protect and shell 2.0 as we call them. She
Yes.
removes both. She sets him up with that unit resist shred like you mentioned, and that really is what's going to make his damage really pop off, especially because that's a two-hit chain as well. So he's starting to ramp up the chains with her. She does also have the damage amp there with the physical and magical damage increase to
Yep.
allies.
Yep.
So yeah, the the power jump that we're going to see when we get her in the game and the vision card, I think is really going to increase substantially. So I 100% agree that there's no reason to really rush this unit or go out and pull him right away. He's like we said though before, he can be okay now. I think he's fine. He's competitive, but he's not going to be blowing the barn doors down. He's not going to be like the top of the meta chain. Um, because there are so many options right now. It's pretty wide open. There's a lot of counters to units coming out, or ones that we've used before. So yeah, I think things are in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, and one thing that I'm thinking about in particular for missile units that I like is that right now we have been in a little bit of a seal meta for like last year. It's not really new. Missile units have always been privileged that they're typically outside the range of some of the hits to get sealed. So I know Jayden on his own buff is a removal of courage on hit, and Yuna has a removal of re-raise. She's also got the dispel of haste. So like that's one of those things that I'm looking at these two units, and I see like three things right there that are constantly getting sealed within the game that they can dispel kind of early. That is really kind of a unique advantage for these ranged units. So I am appreciating that about them.
And then if they did get sealed, Jayden does have the slow as well, where you can just get it that way potentially.
Yep.
Um, One other thing I meant to mention it a moment ago, but yeah, I don't think it's translated on Motive Calc, but within Yuna's self buff, I believe that she has a re-raise sealing capability as well. I think that's part of her follow-up
Oh,
attack, I want to say.
that would be enormous because she and Jaden are both re-raise units. So if she can do
Yeah,
that, that's substantial. Yeah, I like
yeah,
that.
I'm 100% positive that she can do that. So, and then she does have the CT nullification as well. That is part of her follow-up.
Very nice.
So
I like it.
yeah, that team's going to be great. I saw in the chat Numero is asking, is it going to be like the Helena Vivi level of like oppressive team? Uh, it's tough to say right now because it's still so new, even in JP, and we haven't really even seen the effects over there. I think that even when we do have the combo, the vision cards picture still isn't 100% there. If it was, I would say maybe it could be like maybe after we get a couple more cards and this team's really cooking. Maybe it could be that strong, but I don't think it's going to be right out of the gate. I think it's going to be very good and maybe one of the best teams when they're together, but I don't think it's going to be like overly oppressive that you can't counter it.
I agree. I actually think it will be counterable. There's a couple things that they're missing that I think are going to allow some competition. Number one, that team doesn't have a general dispel, which is really important still. Even though it can get sealed, that's still something to factor into many teams that it should be somewhere in there, somewhere in a team of three. We've seen teams with the Ramada Lightning unit, like the Halloween, Alaya, and Lucille, them not having a general dispel. Like you notice it, you feel it, even if it's not 100% accurate all the time in landing. But they also don't have any solid barrier break, which is still like a great way to, take some of that damage. And then, oh goodness, what was the other thing? Oh, I don't know if either one of them has like a really oppressive level of missile res pen. Part of the ice
Yeah.
missile metal back in the day was that they had the vision cards to enable some of the missile resistance penetration, and even those units innately got to like some new levels of that, and they haven't done that so far with these units. Jayden comes in at 20. I don't remember what unit has off the top of my head, but that's the kind of thing where even if it's not like Pierce in terms of how amazing Pierce resistance is, Missile is still like decently able to be guarded against wherever she is. But I know that's like another way to theoretically reduce some of their incoming damage. Yuna has
I don't think she has any.
none. She got none. Right. So there you go. So
Maybe she does on her weapon, or she has something on her weapon that helps her out, I think, with it. But yeah, none baked into the kit innately.
so there you go. So like combination of like barriers, buffs, uh, missile resistance. That you're gonna be able to counterplay them.
I think for Jayden, at least he does have access. Like if you're building him within ice, he does have. I think it was Elias card maybe, or Elias's one of those two has missile res penetration, if I remember correctly.
That is correct, but not a popularly used card. And if you're doing
Correct.
any
Yeah.
kind of rainbow team, you're only going to get a little bit of upside out of that. I think it was this one, yeah, 18% in the maiden slot, and only 10% of the sub slot. So yeah, okay, he gets an extra 10 in the sub slot. Like, okay,
I think it would be maybe interesting, like, and maybe, once we look at the mastery ability threes later, Alaya is one of the ones that is getting upgraded. So maybe it could be interesting for that particular team anyway.
yep, I agree with that. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm still going to keep using them. I'm using them in Guild War today. We were really fortunate. We saw a Shreka oriented wall from Chocoboss, and I was able to get 6 stars with that Jayden team. So he certainly fits in well with what Shreka and Garusa, some of these other wind units still popularly used are. We know that he can one tap Shreka quite easily with his limit break. So there's still like a time and place for him given the strength of the other units. And Sephiroth has kind of fallen off. That I'm not all that worried about fire like I was a month ago. It's still a consideration because there are great fire units, but I don't think it's the same level that it was.
Sephiroth absolutely demolishes him though.
Right.
That's for sure because he has no curse resistance. So that is definitely a problem for him. As soon as you start forgetting about curse that it exists, that's when you're really susceptible to it. So
Yep.
um, yeah, certainly has that to worry about. But yeah, as an anti-wind unit, he does have the wind resistance buff as his main party buff as well.
Good point.
I My one kind of issue with his buff is that it is only like the single tile buff. I thought we were past that where we could buff 2 units at once if we wanted to with like either the diamond or like the extended range on this. So I don't even like I don't like that when we go backwards on like the buff flexibility on some of this stuff, especially for missile units where a lot of times they're getting that decreased movement and it's a little bit harder for them to maneuver around in some situations. So.
I agree with you. I actually was thinking through this, but I actually think this makes sense the more I thought about it. And go with me here. A lot of those units have been getting the diamond buff here because they innately have the move -1. And so that diamond is necessary for them to actually reach a unit 3 squares away. Because Jayden does not start with any negative move, he doesn't necessarily need the diamond to reach the teammate. But once he does get this buff and decreases move -1, I think the odds of you repeating this buff, because this is a buff that would repeat, is vastly decreased because any unit that's going to be near him in that buff area is going to retain their 3 movement, and he's now all of a sudden going to go down to 2 movement. So once he moves to a teammate, someone who's 3 squares ahead, I don't see this buff repeating. I think if you add a diamond, all of a sudden this buff repeats with some more inconsistency. So I thought the same thing, but I think it made a little more sense the more I played with it.
Except when you have Shinryu or any kind of debuff weakening in the party, which throws off that whole plan. Apparently, though, according to Gumi and JP, that is how it was designed from the beginning, which I don't believe at all, but
I don't either.
whatever.
I don't either. I don't hate it, to be honest. It's just one of those things you have to know about. That debuff weakening
Exactly.
doesn't make it happen. I actually kind of like it. That it's another way for you to play with the movement without having to change an entire passive ability for him or something like that. That's been a real downside for some of these missile units where we want them to have 3 move, and you literally can't remove that passive because there's so many other good effects to it. He doesn't have that same problem.
Yeah, I love it for manual play, at least.
Absolutely, absolutely. But yeah, I think that's most of what I want to cover for Jayden. Not a game breaking unit, but a genuinely really solid unit who's going to only get better, I think, considering the direction they've gone with unit. And we, again, don't even know his vision card yet or if they're coming out with an Esper form. We don't even know the next unit they come out with. They come out with a great missile unit again. Who even knows? Like, it's way too early.
Yeah. I mean, I think it might be interesting for them to play around with the idea of like a missile-based tank again.
Hmm.
Because, I mean, definitely, I think Jayden and Yuna could use somebody to take the heat off them. And kind of they benefit, I think, from being having a unit with hate in the party for sure. But we saw that in the past with Barrett, but it was kind of it was okay, but not great. I wouldn't mind seeing it again on a better version.
Same. I mean, they kind of did it with Duran recently. Maybe that is a blueprint for them to lean into. Even though Duran hasn't had that effect that we've wanted, it was a smart way to build the character.
Yep.
Yeah. But no, I think that's it for Jayden. We will talk briefly about Nichol here, who is definitely coming in this next week. It's a 70 cost unit. They will offer a 2K paid banner to get him at level 120 immediately. And that 2K paid banner, you can also spend another 2K pay to get his vision card max. This is the first time that they've done a banner like this for both a unit and a vision card. It ironically is coming just in time, I think, for Black Friday for us here around that Thanksgiving time, and that's a hell of a deal, quite frankly. This is, I think, probably the best value they've ever had in the game when you consider what the cost of 2K paid Viz actually is. Um, yeah, what do you think about it still? Anything changed with Nickel last week to this week?
I don't think so. I mean, I'm still going to go for that deal. Obviously, it hasn't been confirmed yet. It's all conjecture at this point. I think there's a like 99% chance that we're going to get it, and it's going to be branded as the Black Friday deal for global, which is it's a great deal. I think people should take advantage of it. I think we said last week he's not a meta unit, but he is very solid. He'll be good in limited guild war and class match kind of limited cost situations. The TMR is pretty good. The kit is solid. The vision card is great too because it's good for red mage and it's good for devout and glove. So
Yep.
I think the vision card is probably the better of the two values. Considering how they've kind of have kept the status quo with hollow vision cards, at least in terms of getting them, and they're still very expensive. So yeah, I like it quite a bit. I think it would be like Chef's Kiss if they also then put out a pack F this week, for Black Friday.
That'd be
Would
cool.
love to see that, maybe a couple of them, and kind of get people spending on the game again and get us some more runtime.
I agree. Just that little bit of momentum. I also am going to participate in this. The vision card alone, that's a no-brainer for me. I was on the fence whether or not I was going to do Nickel, because I'll be honest, I really don't have any intentions to use him. I don't know if he solves an immediate need for my account at the moment, but the deal is so good. That's one of those things that I want to support that decision of theirs. And let's be real, not just gotcha games, in capitalism in America nowadays. Money talks. If people buy things, game developers and companies respond. So I want to be part of that, where I do want to spend just the 2K pay to get them, to let them know, do keep doing this. Even if it's not nickel, if it could be a unit down the line, that I want them to do it again for it.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I don't really. I mean, I've been waiting for this unit because he was like an FFBE, kind of part of that OG story. But yeah, I don't see, other than kind of playing around with him to see how he goes. I don't envision him being like part of my daily driver team. But who knows? Maybe he could surprise me. We'll see.
Yeah, same. Absolutely. But yeah, that's all we want to talk about, just to bring some attention to that. We are going to get into our hot takes segment now, though, and this has been a fun one. It's just basically throwing out a question that we've kind of seen some chatter about somewhere, whether it's subreddits, discords, Sometimes it's things that we've heard in our own conversations, you and I, and we figure maybe this is a controversial thing that has some back and forth. But the first hot take is that the meta is healthier now than any time post third anniversary. Do you want to take this one first? Is this a hot take or is
Sure.
this true?
I don't think this is a hot take. I think this is a cold take because I do think it's true. Um, I think that as of right now, there's many different competitive teams that you can run, and it's only going to get better once the missile team comes through. And I think we're finally getting to that, what you might call golden time. We're heading toward, we're getting very close to that, where the meta is more wide open. We have rock, paper, scissors kind of coming into play, come into fruition. And finally, all the building blocks that they've been laying out since June and Mont, back in April, are finally kind of coming around. And we've seen some units come back again already, like Jum and Cloud
Yeah.
and some of these other units. And Gilgamesh has come back and been useful against Shrek. And it's kind of circular that way, kind of how similar to what we saw in the first year, where they built up a meta, and units might come back and counter new ones. And um, you know, so I think that that is happening right now. And to be honest, we really haven't seen it since the third anniversary, because the power creep had just been escalating, so quickly since Sephiroth came, and then we went to Bradley, and then we went to Alaya and Soul and Helena, and I think everybody felt the effects of that.
I would agree, and I also agree with this take. I do think this is the healthiest been in quite some time. I think right now, and again, actually, let me walk down memory lane here. Third anniversary was Dark Sephiroth, which kind of ushered in the bit of the dark meta there with Fina and Lemeray and even Dwayne for a while once they released him. But we did get the bones of the strike meta coming out with the Full Metal Alchemist. That was a significant vision card competitive advantage that they had. Bradley alone, as you mentioned, was an absolute powerhouse that dominated multiple metas for significant periods of time. It wasn't until that like Raph came back here that Dark kind of saw a resurgence, but even then that was quickly turned over once Bridal Alaya came in. And even then, once Alaya was in, she didn't leave for a very long time because even though they had released Soul to kind of counter her, he actually ended up joining her in many of those teams. He was not actually an Alaya hard counter. He was just kind of like Gilgamesh to Sephiroth. Like it was just another meta unit to throw into this team. And it really wasn't until Helena Vivi, which did persist for a while, that we finally got to Sephiroth. And right now, when I look at these units toward the top, these are all still units that are very much playable. They may not be like meta per se, but I think they're exceptionally viable still. If not, maybe on defense for walls and best in slot. Absolutely on offense, absolutely in quick pick matches where there is Visior on the line for some of the winners. That right now I think you could go back to as far as Joom. And anybody released after Joom, I still think is viable. Although they might not be amazing, I think they're all viable. I don't think there's a single unit here you can't play, which you really can't even say for much of the third anniversary. If you go back in time here again, like I remember back when Bradley was dominating, we had a stretch of time here where like Reagan came out, kind of did nothing. Kefka, as much as we loved it, didn't do what we hoped. Vega and Sweetheart Miranda never saw the light of day. And there's so many units here. Even Bart's, Ferris, and Lena never really came until much later. There was like a huge lag time on when they were playable, and same could be said for Final Fantasy VIII. And arguably, two out of those three units were never playable. For as much as we want to admit the hard
Even
reality of that.
Jayden the Celebrated too.
Jaden the
He
Celebrated,
was another dud. Even though we were like had such copium for the spear meta that never
right,
ended up coming.
right, exactly. So even through much of last year, there were units that came and were kind of dead on arrival. We also had the 6 month roadmap at that time. A lot of this was pre-road to worldwide too, so we could be a little pickier. But I think right now things are really balanced, and it is. It's you have magic, you have spear, you have missile scaling magic, you have missile scaling slash. There's a lot of diversity in the elements. It's good.
I was about to make a similar point, kind of going back to last year. There were so many units that, yeah, like you said, just really didn't do much of anything to impact the meta. And I think, although we do have some of those this year with this new meta, I mean, there's a couple that maybe you could point to. Duran or Angela maybe is probably the biggest example. Other than that, though, I feel like the majority of units have been hits from them. Some of them bigger than others, but for the most part, I think that their batting average with quality usable units is much better. In this meta. In the chat, Coppola asked, "How oppressive is the Exia Sodali Lucio team in this meta?" I think that's probably the closest we have to an oppressive team, but I would hesitate to call it oppressive at this point because there are ways that you can beat that team with units that we have already,
Yeah, yeah,
and it's going to get easier once the missile team comes in.
agreed. That is, I think, the meta team in many instances because they're just so well rounded. The CT manipulation of how they get CT up and how much self sustain they have, the haste, the seals on buffs. But I would agree it's not oppressive. There's counterplay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there you are limited in some of the options if you maybe didn't get somebody like a Dario, for example, to help you out with that, or maybe you didn't pull Fang to get her TMR, which is frankly incredibly useful against that team.
Yes.
Um,
Uh,
so if you don't have those pieces, maybe that is a very oppressive team for you. But I think there is some things now that we have Agrius, maybe they can help you out against that team as well with some status effect play.
honorable mention in case people don't know it or misread it because this is translated incorrectly on World of Calc. I hate to always bring it up, but it's the truth. This accessory makes it so that on hit you nullify enemy CT up capability, so they cannot get CT up once you hit them with it on hit effects. So
Yeah.
this has been monumental because a lot of their heals and their follow ups and their counter abilities have some kind of CT up baked into it. We were using this. I would say like a month ago, even because even Shreka with the Wizard Rod has that CT up, and even Gilgamesh has CT
Yeah.
up on kill. That we were finding it useful to mitigate some of that CT up, but now more than ever, really good TMR.
When you have those teams that are that strong and that level of oppressive, you kind of have to go into the bag of tricks and you have to go to the tactical game, the X's and O's thing, as we like to call it. And that is certainly one of those X's and O pieces that unfortunately not everybody has it. And then we did just get a unit in Orlando that does
Yes,
have that capability. Unfortunately, Sadali is just really, really strong against him.
right.
You could maybe look back at Zidane, but I think it might be a little bit of copium. I don't think it's 100% copium though, because he has like the barrier break slash CT null on the same attack. That's very good against Sottily. I just think that his level of damage is not great. So if he could come back and get like an MA3, he would definitely be in that picture for sure though.
Yeah, but yeah, worth giving it a shot. Depends on your level of play. Wherever you guys compete, if your Guild Wars a little more liberal, Zidane might be the answer for you.
Yep.
Yep. But we'll get to the second hot take here, which uh, not one that I think we've really heard a lot of. I don't want to say conversation on, but I think it's one that you hear less about nowadays. That unit element doesn't matter that much anymore when evaluating characters. Do you think it's a hot take, or do you think that's somewhat true?
Um,
Oh, I can kick it off if you want then.
yeah, why don't you kick it off?
Yeah, I actually think this is true, and I want to focus on the word evaluating characters. I think this is still true when it comes to matchups. I would not take an ice unit into a fire team. Like that's not a good matchup. But when it comes to like evaluating a unit, there was a time where you're like, oh, it's a dark unit. That's great. They need to be dark. Or oh, we need a new wind unit for this. And the element really drove a lot of the units strength, viability, team building, this and that. And right now, I don't think element really comes into a factor at all for me when I'm considering the strength of a unit or some of the pros and cons. I might think a little bit of the meta timing, where if you're in like a Sephiroth meta where fire is just absolutely everywhere, ice is at a smidge of a disadvantage. But even then, we saw Gilgamesh absolutely be perfectly fine through much of that. And even in the Shreka meta right now, like you would think that Sodali would be dead, and like he's not. Sodali's still everywhere. We thought that Ashen Mont, and I even saw more Ashen Mont than I thought I was going to see on Shreka's release. It wasn't everywhere, but it wasn't gone. And so I think nowadays, when it comes to unit analysis, I actually don't even really think much about the element. It's part of the damage calc, but we've gotten a lot of power creep in the game around damage percent up and down as well. That I think the advantage and disadvantage to this is is decreased from day one, where it used to be that a 25% damage increase was absolutely bonkers to have when you say a strong element hitting a weaker element. But unit's got 20% on a buff. Like that alone is comparable to what the element advantage is. So even though I wouldn't take that matchup, it's not nearly as oppressive as it once was. So that's I think that's where I land on it.
I agree with that. Like in terms of evaluation, there's all the new effects that they brought into that where they'll often, like subtly is a good example where we already had an extremely powerful unit in Shrek in the game. Um, that came out recently, right? Only maybe a month before he did. And people probably were thinking, is this unit dead on arrival? Like Shrek is everywhere. I remember even thinking a little bit to myself that as well, kind of before I actually used him. But when you kind of look at the intricacies of the kit and how they're building the units, they do kind of give them some X factors against those previous counters that kind of help tip the scales a little bit. So like Sodali, for example, he's got like the magic reduction X factor on, every third turn.
Yep.
He has the all element resistance that she can't dispel.
Yep.
And he's just generally, very, bulky and has a lot of HP and things like that. So it's very difficult for him to one shot her. Um, so yeah, I think that's kind of how they've been building these bricks. They give us somebody who can be very strong against the latest unit, but maybe isn't just a slam dunk against them. And I think that's been a good way to do it.
Absolutely. And actually, I'll pause real quick. GC Plugs in the chat just asked, because it's related, I think, do you think we'll get another strong Dark unit to help propel Dark a little bit? And I think the answer is yes. I think imminently, not only Pain from 10-2, but also the Dark Veritas unit. Now, it will take a little bit of time, I think, to get him to max, maybe a couple of weeks. I don't know exactly what that content involves. But I do think you have two really compelling Dark units that are coming into the fold still.
I wouldn't be surprised to see another one because, the adoption of Angela wasn't very high. I don't think the adoption of Cypher was very high either, although he probably got a few more pulls. I wanted to address Cecil in the chat. He said, I don't really think Agrius is a big threat against Exia and Sodali, even with her wide assortment of status ailments.
Let me get my
I,
popcorn. I'll be right back. Let me get popcorn. Go ahead, JV.
I have to hard disagree with that
Yeah.
because although you can counter what she brings, you have to change your whole build to do it. So at that point, even just the threat of Agrius being there, you just change your whole build. You trade your you change your trust stone loadout. Maybe you're bringing in the mushroom, the marshmallow. So 100% disagree that she hasn't affecting that matchup at all. And even if you do account for those status effects, she still has a 30% chance to stop you, still has a 30% chance to confuse you, and she probably is going to get the poison on you regardless. So that, besides the fact that she's bringing in the shell and, is very hard to kill herself, her damage is actually not bad either, if you do build into it. So
I would agree. I was just going to say, out of all the units at the moment, too, I actually think she's one of the bulkiest units I've seen against the two of them. She can live for a substantially long time. And to your point on the shell or effect, one of the things I've noticed is that I can basically force Exia to keep spamming her missile ability here because although this Dispel Shell makes it so that it bypasses Agrius's aura, so the damage gets to go through. It basically forces her into repeating this ability multiple times rather than using something like the Unit Crush or the Sleep effect or the damage reduction. So you can kind of skew her AI a little bit by making her just repeat this over and over and over and over and over because you have that shell aura constantly active.
yeah, so I mean, we're using Agrius for limited Guild War, and we're probably going to beat the number 2 or 3 guilds with Agrius.
Yeah,
So I mean, kind of take that for what it's worth.
agreed, agreed. That'll get us to our third hot take, though. Hopefully, I think these are great so far. The third one, Jayden is mid. We talked about Jayden to start off the segment. Also, this is a difficult term to define because mid can mean a lot of things to different people. But is this a hot take, or do you think this is true?
I don't think it's a hot take. I think it's closer to being true than than it is to false. I mean, we kind of gave away the bag a little bit this with the opening discussion on him, but I would be lying if I didn't say that I was a little bit underwhelmed or maybe even like disappointed with the unit. Um, because it is like a such a big character. It's a big event with the fifth anniversary. So I did expect a little bit more, but when I really thought about it, and we talked a little bit about this in the initial discussion, but I just think because we got him early, those effects are amplified for us specifically, kind of where we are in the building of that new missile team. So I think at the end of the day, I think that he's going to end up where he needs to be.
Uh, I don't know if this is a hot take. I actually think this is slightly more true than not true. And for no other reason than we're lucky we have the foresight of Yuna. If we didn't know that Yuna was coming into the game, I would say this unit is mid. I think the fact that we know that Yuna is coming into the game and we see some future potential for him gives us that glass half full that no, this unit we could see it coming together. But him individually, there's things that I really just think that they did miss the mark on, and some of that being like I don't like the fact that it's a 25% slow. I don't like that that's a touchdown passive away. I think that should be 40 to 50% like the other increased ailments that we've gotten as of late. I've seen some problems with his AI as we were talking about, not only with like buff movement, but just getting things down in terms of the debuff weakening, that there are things that are very map dependent that don't always work in your favor. Him and the card selection is not amazing. If you look at what he brings individually, there's some utility there. The courage removal is pretty awesome, I think. And his mid fight heal with the CT up is pretty exceptional. That is really great for him using on himself or him just using on a teammate. But there are other units that do something similar. I know like Exia have that going on right now where they heal a teammate or CT up to the teammate. So even then, it's not like uniquely special to him. So I think looking at him in a vacuum, I don't think that's that far off. He's still a quality unit, but there's a lot that's going to need to happen to really put him toward the S tier, where right now, like A tier or B tier is more mid for us, which is why I say it depends on how you define it.
And I think like for me, like what I've come to realize is we've kind of gotten further into this new meta, this new next gen, War of the Visions. Those first like batch of units, like the Jooms, the Monts, the Sephiroth, Clouds, those first like handful of like 6 to 8 units felt so strong from what we were used to, and like each one just felt like it was better and better. We have like leveled off, I think, since Final Fantasy VII, Advent Children, where each unit is kind of maybe just on a similar plane as what we've seen before, but just does different things or counters different things, gives us different look, different type of damage, maybe that we isn't well covered in the meta. And that's what this unit is. Like he's the missile. This is the missile team. It's going to enable different types of optimal strategies on certain maps, and that team just isn't there yet. And I've seen that like with the glove team. Like if they didn't release Sottily at the same time as Crimson Wizard, we're saying the same thing about Sottily, right?
Exactly.
And even when we did get those two units that same week, they were still missing Exia's vision card, which
Correct.
is a big part of making that team really cook. So we're seeing that with these next gen teams, that the entrenched meta is so strong and powerful that we need like a fully developed team to really overturn anything, and that's just not there yet for the gun team.
Right. And I do think the gun team will likely end up being better than the ice team. That was another question that Cecil had right now. That which one's better, the ice team or the missile team for Jayden? I think the missile team will end up being better. I think the ice team is one of the best ones at the moment. You can certainly make that work, but that's very easily counterable. Whereas the missile team has a lot more in the X's and O's going forward, a lot more well-rounded, not as easily beat. But both are quality.
Greatnessness says maybe 5 versus 5 will help him. I actually think that unit attack or select 2 units are at a disadvantage in 5 versus 5. I think that AoE diamond AoE attackers like Sotiles, like the Gilgameshes, are going to be the kings of that mode. Maybe I could be wrong, but unless they develop new maps where units are kind of laned off from each other and you have kind of their own skirmishes and then they meet in the middle, I think it's just going to be an AoE fest.
I agree with that. I agree. Well, we actually noticed that when Ashen Mont came out as one of those first like select two units that we were so um, spoiled by Bridal Alaya with the select three that it never really dawned on us that if you can only hit 2 out of 3 units at a time, you can only hit 2 out of 3 units at a time. Like that's a far cry from hitting 3 to 5 units.
He does have piercing. That's correct, Randall. So yeah, maybe that'll be good. He does have a select 2 piercing attack.
Is that what
I
it
think
is?
Yuna does as well, to be honest.
Uh, is it a select two piercing?
Or maybe it's Yuna that I'm thinking of that
No,
has
it
the
is.
select 2
Okay,
piercing.
okay, 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 okay. Nope,
Okay.
this is better. That's salvageable. So, okay, good point. That's a good call. Jayden maybe is fine. Maybe the more stereotypical select two units, more what we're referencing there. But that's I'm glad Randall pointed that out because that does change things a lot.
Yep.
Yeah. But we'll get to the fourth hot take here, which I think is a good one. The fourth hot take here that the Jayden TMR is now the best TMR in the game. Recap for those that haven't seen it: it's an accessory, 218 HP, 8 defense, 6 agility, 16 accuracy. It's the 25% AP restore. That's the same as the Zizabels, but it's for an extra turn. So it's 4 turns instead of 3. And this, again, unfortunately mistranslated, this is not an absorb damage done. This is a dispel of enemy buffs that absorb damage. So like Angela has this mechanic, it doesn't affect abilities that have a natural damage absorb. It's for units that upon buff will absorb damage for a certain amount of turns. That this will dispel that. Is this a hot take? Is this the best TMR in the game?
Best is a strong word. I think that it's in the conversation for sure. I don't if you want to say that best for how versatile it is and that you can use it for many different things. You can use this for raids, you can use this for PvE, and you can use this in PvP. Then maybe it does overtake Z's bells, which it definitely is better than Z's bells because it has the same effect plus it adds another one. I think it even has more accuracy than
It
Z's
does.
bells.
It's got
So
better stats on everything except the agility. It's 1 point slower.
yeah, and I still use Z's bells as a stat stick to this day in almost every single build, just for that agility accuracy combination. And this is another one that you can put right next to it that's comparable, if not better. So even outside of the fact it's got the great stats, it's got a good effect. Anybody can use it because it's an accessory. So I think like on versatility, it does overtake Z's bells, and I think that I would agree with that statement.
I best is so hard because best means it's the best. This is a top three TMR. I can't say it's best because to me, to your point about the Zizabels being a stat stick, if I'm taking this as a stat stick, I'm just going to choose Zizabels because it's got one more agility. We find that one agility point for starting turn order can matter quite frequently. It sounds so small, but if I'm just using this as a stat stick, which for auto PvP, the AP restore function of Zizabels is not all that often used anymore. There's enough like AP dispel on hit from a lot of units. There's enough like the Veritas TMR as well. Even just general buffs, you can't always weave the Zizabel's buff into your rotation. That I don't see the effect of this having value in PvP. And from that perspective, if it's a stat stick, I'm just going to put Zizabels because it's faster. But this is a huge upgrade for PvE modes. Like this makes raids significantly easier in any kind of auto PvE where that whole extra turn of AP restore. Not only the fact that now you have two different TMRs that can do it. I mean, you always had Emberlight as the Lucio one has to be. There are other AP restore type TMRs, but this to me now, if I'm like trying to solo a raid, is definitely better because you're getting AP for longer. So agreed. If you're talking about general versatility for all game modes in the game for everything you do, this is like absolutely no doubt a banger, probably the best one. But for functional team building, I think I'm still probably just going Zizabels for the extra agility point.
But you have 3 units on your team, so it's nice to have another one that has comparable stats. That's why I
Yes.
couched it the way I did, because I think when you kind of look at and everything that we can do in the game, it's definitely in the conversation.
The accuracy skews it
See,
because there's other ones that are just as fast, if not faster. So like that,
mhm.
if I'm picking top three agility TMRs for my three units, this still doesn't crack the top three fastest agility TMRs, but the accuracy on it certainly is good because some of those agility ones don't have the accuracy on it.
But in terms of like the effects, there's a couple of questions in the chat in terms of the PvP use of the effect. I wouldn't really use this one in probably most builds, unless I was specifically trying to counter the absorb effect, which a lot of units have. So, I mean, you could use it for that. Like Sottily has it, like a bunch of units have it. Orlando. Um, so it's not bad for that because there's a lot of like active healing that goes on because of that effect. But I don't know if it would be the first one that I would go to. I think that there's more higher impact ones that you could use.
I agree. My simple answer to that is: Are you using Zizabels right now and turning on that buff and using it right now? If the answer is yes, then this is better. It's as simple as that. If you're not using that buff already, then this is not going to do anything to change that discussion.
Yeah.
Yeah. But okay, all right. That gets us through the hot takes. That was a good selection of them. So if you guys keep the chatter going in social media, on Reddit, on Discords, because we listen. I mean, we obviously are there. If we see enough of these topics kind of hitting some stride and maybe some back and forth on a conversation piece, we'll find it, use it. Great thing to talk about. But we will segue now to the MA3s, and we didn't want to like go terribly deep in these because they are, I don't know, 2 weeks away, but they're closer than you think. But I know this is a big conversation piece because for a long time we were asking for units to get caught up from the power creep. We were looking for an MA3. We had no news on the horizon until just recently. And even now, they're going very atypical to history where they used to roll out upgrades like MA2s, like limit break upgrades, and they would do so in like chronological order of when the unit was released. So you would get Ziza and Eld and Stern and all these like day one units, but they're not doing that this time. They're actually like curating their list of a couple and really going methodically through them, which is actually kind of nice. And that's why we wanted to bring some attention to this. That we'll look at to see if it's thumbs up or thumbs down. And we have a couple. I don't know. Yeah, we'll go through all. We have Elena. We have Alaya, both kinds, both girls. Helena, the original, and Kitone. And again, we don't need to go too deep on this. We'll just talk about it. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Um, Helena is getting an extra 10% evade rate flat. She's getting 15% evasion versus any magical type attacks, 15 unit res pen, and then when she falls below 50% HP, she actually gets nullify sure hit for 3 turns when she falls below that. Uh, Thumbs up, thumbs down, and does this make her usable?
I think that's a thumbs up. So if you think about what's happened with the next generation power spike, the general accuracy increase across new units has been about 20 to 25% base compared to where it used to be on average. So she's getting that here. She's getting 20 evasion rate or 10 evasion rate increase, but then she's also getting the magical evasion on top of that. So particularly against magical units, she's really going to have that niche and be very evasive there. The unit res penetration, really nice. That's a next gen effect. That's something we like to see. And then the null sure hit is what I think Elena fans have been waiting for on this unit. Unfortunately, it's not buffed on. It is triggered. So I think that could be a very big problem for her because, she is an old unit. It's very easy to one shot her, with a courage removal unit, and she never even gets to use this. So that is kind of the drawback of this unit, but that is going to be matchup dependent. There's I think going to be matchups where she can potentially be used, but you're going to have to pick and choose those.
Agreed. Real quick, someone asked a question: do the MA3 units also get the commander abilities? Just so you guys don't know, commander abilities only work on specific job groups in certain modes. MA3s have absolutely nothing to do with the commander abilities. So, in case there's some confusion around that still, because we don't have many commanders, but that's not connected to this at all. But
I think outside of Prince Mons, unless they change it up, I think their original announcement was it's going to be just brand new units that are getting commander. for the foreseeable future.
Correct. Okay, yeah, maybe I misinterpreted. Yeah, MA3s do not get commander abilities. Only new units are getting commander abilities right now. It's
Yep.
good rephrase.
Yeah, MA3 is just that's the latest round of upgrades that we've seen over time. But these ones are much more substantial than we've seen on in the past in terms of Mastery 2s or Mastery 1s.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I like this personally. I think the math checks out to your evade rate perspective. The null sure hit, I think, is what every evade unit really needs in as of late, unless they have some kind of significant bulk, which she doesn't. Is it going to make her playable? Some modes, not a lot, but this certainly closes the gap in a meaningful way. This is a thumbs up for me. Absolutely.
I think my other big problem with Elena right now is that she is limited to the global exclusive pool, on global,
Yeah.
which we don't have easy access to get her shards for reincarnation,
Yep.
which I think for like highly competitive play is 100% needed to reincarnate. Especially for an evasion unit because they need that extra, luck and agility to be able to dodge and do what they need to do. So I hope that Gumi knows that we need better access to these shards for the global units because unless they decide to run the events, we just can't get them.
Definitely. I agree. But yeah, either way, it's a thumbs up. I'm sure she'll get some usage still. I like what they did with that. For Bridal Alaya, one of the upgrade or a couple of the upgrades here, they're giving her the unit res pen of 30%. They're also giving her, I think it was just this. I think it's just these two. I don't think I see any other differences here. Her extra ability is that when she falls below 50% HP, she'll absorb half the damage done for 3 turns. I'll be honest, I think this is really solid. Alaya has still shown over the past like couple months, you can splash her in there and she still will surprise you, but she was absolutely in that glass cannon category. But right now, the ability to still select 3 units at a height range of 2, now getting the 30 unit res pen. I know strike resistance has kind of gone away at the moment, but she's still like one of the easiest strike res pen units in the game. She's got so much from the apparels. The limit break is still absolutely gangbusters that I actually think this is legit. And the fact that she does have that courage capability, that to me, that she does enough damage that she's going to be absorbing enough to actually make this a meaningful amount of health regen. I like it. And the fact that when she does fall below that health threshold, she does get the hate, the negative hate, which has shown to be a really good X factor for surviving a little bit longer. That once you go negative on the hate scale, you don't get hit anymore. You don't get hit anymore.
I think yeah, I think this is very solid. They gave her. You look at the unit res pen that Elena got. She got the 15. Alaya here is getting 30. So
30.
that's like comparable to what newer units are getting. Like Shrek, I think, is around that 30 mark as well, and then she can get to 50 with Garuda. So that's really, really strong. The other effect, I think, like the triggered absorb, is pretty nice too, because I think they just weren't wanting to go too big on this one because she has that select 3 that is extremely like powerful. We haven't seen it again since her. So uh yeah, I think this is also a thumbs up. She's not going to be like what she was, not even close, because her survivability isn't like it used to be. But I think like from a damage perspective, she's definitely going to be there.
Agreed. If I'm considering mono lightning teams, she's now back in the conversation. And if I'm looking at any vision card that includes strike units, I have not considered a strike unit in months. I'm thinking of her now when I see strike on a vision card potential synergy.
Yeah.
The other one here is the OG Alaya. Hers is getting the 10% physical damage up permanently. It is a huge increase to apply frostbite. I don't know if this is mistranslated. It has to be, but there's yeah.
So yeah, so that initially she had the apply frostbite by 15%. So now that's actually going to come out to 25%.
Okay,
So it's a 10% increase. It's written weird here, but it amounts to 25% from the 15.
got it, got it. They're giving the 20 AOE res pen when she's above 70%. Which let's be real, she's either alive or she's dead. This unit is no in between.
Yep.
You're either full health or you're not full health. So that's a nice damage increase for her. This one doesn't do much for me. It's nice, but I don't see her being compelling play. unless you're running just full Unga Bunga triple missile, hoping to damage someone to death before they cross the battlefield with Unit and Jayden. And even then, I think that's a reach for some teams.
I think it's pretty compelling with Jayden, like in that ice missile team.
Yeah.
I think that's actually really strong. She can also use the Chariot Esper and get up to 40% area resist penetration with the
Yes.
ice attack on there.
Good
I
call.
mean, you think about it as like an as a magic Esper, but you can build it with ice attack, crit damage, and AoE pen, and I think that's really strong for her. I like this one less so than the others, just because I feel like if you breathe on her, she dies.
Right.
So there is also a skill upgrade here, though. If that first
Oh,
line,
that's
so
correct. This is an increase to her frostbite ability that she gets decreased healing power of 40, which that
not
helps.
bad.
Not bad. It,
So I mean, I think that she's usable. Like their damage, I think is going to be feel a lot better with the area resist penetration. It's just that it needs to be a advantageous map for missile, and I don't think that you would do it without Jaden or without Yuna. So
I agree. Um, it's a relative thumbs up, but again, this is a much older unit, and so my hopes are pretty low anyway for how much it would take.
right,
That's what also part is. I almost didn't even want to include Helena the Black Rose Witch here because this unit is so far gone old that like I don't even know what it would take to bring her back up here. But they're continuing to decrease her activation time, which is a good thing for the modern state of the game. Extra Spirit Pen 15 is nice. The 25 AoE Res Pen actually is very nice for her. She is Alaya we saw is actually more of a unit based attacker than an AoE based attacker, but Helena was like one of the OG diamond users with not only her limit break, but I know like on her main job here, coming in here with the giant spirit in peril, that's a pretty noteworthy damage increase. And the physical damage of 30%, that reduction, that might save her from getting one shot. It's close. Um, Again, this comes to the conversation: are they reincarnated or not? She likely isn't. So who knows? Going to do much, but this is pretty good. It's pretty good. I don't think it's going to do anything though, but it's pretty good.
so it seems to me that they are kind of amping up the power, depending on the age of the unit and maybe the cost of the unit, because reduced damage physical taken 30%, like that's pretty big. And then the AoE res pen 25. She does also here get the skill upgrade,
Oh God.
which is a pretty substantial one too, if I remember right.
Yes,
It,
she's magic attack 30, another 30 area res pen, reduce physical damage 25%, and she absorbs damage for 4 turns. That is a nice upgrade.
I want to say that there is also an upgrade to her passive ability as well. Oh, that's her. Okay, that was from her previous upgrade that she got
Yeah,
the AoE resistance.
yeah,
So she has like pretty high AoE resistance. She's got the physical damage taken for 4 turns here and within the mastery upgrade. She's going to be instant casting the spells. I think really the only thing that's holding her back for me is the lack of HP, the
right.
lack of any kind of re-raise or courage, and then the lack of magic res penetration. Everything else I feel like is pretty solid now, at
I
least
agree.
against physical teams.
Yeah, completely
Um,
agree.
so I don't think it's going to be usable at the top end, but I think she's going to be leagues better than where she is right now.
I would agree with that. The penetration's big. The penetration reminds me of Delita. This sounds very similar. They gave Delita a lot in terms of like penetrations and remove physical damage reduction, but the dude's just an absolute feather and doesn't offer much outside of that. So in that effect, it really doesn't do much, but it, it's good offensively.
I
Uh,
think like if you could use the what is it, the Dark Phoenix TMR to get the 40% magic res penetration, then she might be cooking a little bit with the damage, at
yeah,
least until she gets hit.
yep, absolutely. Um, is she staff devout or is she staff
She
red
is,
mage? So on Darius brings up a good point. The Exia Vision card does help her quite a bit with the Magic Res pen. So yes,
definitely.
that does help. I thought she was red mage, but if she's devout, that changes it significantly. Cool. That brings us to Kitone, which This is a fun one. Uh, I'll be honest. I actually don't know what the untranslated effect is here. I don't know if anyone in the chat does or JB if you've heard about it, but
I think it's she gets the area resist um area resist evasion, which is what Riku also has.
oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, I think it's like area resist evasion 20 or something like that.
Okay, I like it. I love this from the perspective that this unit is, let's call it what it is, a just a drain force unit at this point. There's really nothing else outside of this kit. Maybe some tricks with the poison mist. Who knows? Obviously, a completely different unit for manual than auto PvP. So there's probably even more that I'm not really considering here with Steel Time and who knows what else she has on the Thief sub job or the Time Age. I'm sorry, the Time Age slow and all those things. But from the Drain Force perspective, which for like I auto PvP at least, which is viable. This is such a cool upgrade that when she's below 20% health, you get the healing power 20 and 50 unit res pen when you're below that amount. She's got that innate courage ability that when you uh, are above 70% HP and get brought down to 0, you will instantly proc courage, which means that these two will now kick into effect, which means when she goes to Drain Force, she'll have 50 unit res pen and extra 20 healing power. I think that's really fun. I think that's a cool way to go about this unit that I like it.
I like it too. I wish that they could have done something with the drain force ability though, because unfortunately it's still a range height 0
Oh,
ability. And
yes.
it's like, it's that's always been a major problem with it. So like I like that they've recognized the fact that that's how what basically her only path to viability is this, using this, and all of her upgrades have been kind of dedicated to using this ability. But at the end of the and it's actually will do very good damage with the unit res pen because that's kind of the only way to really block the damage of it. Um, she still does have the null sure hit that she got before on the LB upgrade, but she has to be able to get into a position to use that LB, and it's a one-time use thing. I've seen people in JP using her with Riku. I don't know if that, I mean, you kind of have to use Riku in Earth Evasion right now, for the most part. So that could be part of like lack of actual partners to use her. I don't know. I like this unit for manual. I don't think it's really going to do anything in that much in auto though, at least on the top end of the game.
No, I would agree. I could see some trolling in arena with it, but that's about it. Pick an enemy team that doesn't have enough accuracy, let it fly, and she just has some fun with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, MA3s, I'm happy with what I saw. I think these MA3s are better than most of the MA2s. They are not only tailor made a little more for the characters, but they seem more impactful in what they chose, where you're seeing ability upgrades to kind of make these abilities more impactful. Whereas some of the MA2s were like area res 10. You know what I mean? Like really just something that like they kind of threw on there. So I think it's promising.
Unfortunately, the units are still behind from the statistics perspective,
Yeah,
but I would have liked to have seen them do something to like the reincarnation cost for these old units to maybe bridge that gap at least a little bit.
I like that.
Because I don't think a lot of us are going to be reincarnating most of these units, so they're going to be even further behind the latest units that we are reincarnating. Um, but I do think that like at a minimum, these units will be more compelling in arena, and if you do invest in them, potentially can even get into Guild War and things like that.
I agree. The thing on the reincarnation, I guess at least the way I think of it, there's an older generation of units that I just don't think are ever going to come back no matter what. And I think it'd be too
Yeah.
much to ask that they do. Like right here from like June downward, like any of these units are just in the graveyard. They're for fun. They've got a place in PvE, some of our leagues that we do, but for actual like competitive game usage, I think these units are gone. What I'm looking for the MA3s are on these units that are like not that far off still, that I do think can be kind of salvageable. And Bridal Alaya sticks out to me as one of those units. And so if you get a Bradley MA3, I mean, they're not going to rerun Full Metal let's be real. But like, let's pick a different unit. You go for like a RAF MA3 or a Jayden the Celebrated MA3. I think this is a good start with what they did with Alaya the Alabaster because these units I would like to see come back into the fold as role players. I don't expect Chunak to come back into the fold or Velric to suddenly get an MA3 and be usable. Like, not gonna happen.
I agree with you. I think that the those units are yeah 100% too far gone. They need too much work at this point, complete reworks in a lot of cases. So that kind of, if you think about that's kind of why I thought when they did the announcement for Final Fantasy 14 and with Thancred and Ishtola, those two units definitely fall into that bucket of too old, too far gone. Even for 3 years ago, they were they were too far gone.
Uh,
So that's what kind of made me think MA3 is not going to cut it for them. They need complete reworks, and I expect that for them.
Agreed, and I also think we need to reemphasize that a lot of this power creep we were complaining about recently was never about year two units being viable. Year two units weren't viable last year before any of this happened. There's levels,
Yeah.
there's units that have just been gone forever. It was more some of these units that, like Zidane, that just came out, that is now just toast. Like that felt odd. That felt bad. That some of these units a year ago, um, it's, so yeah, this idea that all
Even the
units,
units I pulled this year, like Lucio and all these Ashes of the Apocalypse units that
right,
almost immediately went into the scrap heap, within a month or two.
right.
Those were like the units that really rubbed me the wrong way the most when we kind of went into that power creep because I barely built some of these units before they were getting blown out and blown off the map. So hopefully they treat those units right because actually they did announce. I think I heard that they're going to continue the something with Ashes of Apocalypse or something with another story. They're working on the next chapter of that. So I'm sure we'll be seeing those upgrades come along in the coming months.
Nice. I like it. All right. Well, that was the MA3s. We did want to give some honorable mention here to some quality of life upgrades that they kind of give us a ninja upgrade on that weren't really highlighted or well announced ahead of time. But they're two of the upgrades that we've been wanting the longest. Now, these went live in JP, and it just so happened that when we got a lot of this simultaneous push of things like the commander upgrade and Jayden, that this is one of those things that got pushed ahead of schedule. It was toggles by game mode for TMRs and for espers, where we've been asking forever. TMRs and espers were either on or off binary for all game modes. They were completely unlike the rest of the toggles. If you go into your game right now, this has been live since last patch or last week or 2 weeks ago even. You can now toggle your TMRs and your esper abilities by game mode. And if you aren't doing that already, you damn sure should right now to make sure that your arena settings aren't the same as your Guild War settings. That was my number one priority to quality of life. That was a necessity that had actual competitive ramifications. There's been so many Guild War fights where I go to hit and I forgot that I had the TMR from Arena. Or this last week we had Raid. I had Exia with the TMR toggle on because I needed her to fight, and my Exia on Guild War, I need that TMR toggle off. And so there was actually some days where like it really came back to hurt you. Or you'd forget. You would do quick pick, and your quick pick team has it on, but your arena team doesn't. Like it's the same game mode. You just always have to constantly think about it, and this at least solves a bunch of it. So big shout out for that.
Yeah, and same thing like with the espers, like that's you can now turn those off completely by game mode. So yeah, I think it's something we've been requesting for a long time. It's great to finally see it. So yeah,
Yeah,
I've already been using it with Luciel. I think is another big one that I've kind of have had different preferences depending on which mode I'm in.
absolutely. Yeah, those new supports, Lucille, Resnick, Fina, like those TMRs matter because if you get the TMR by accident on, they might stick back in slot two and never move for the entire Guild War fight if they sit there and buffer too long. But yeah, that was it. With the last two segments we have here, we'll see if we can go through these. We got some time to kill, but we figured do something a little bit different. Did you prefer to do one over the other, the content creator Q&A or the football team? Do you have a preference, JB? We're at an hour
Mm,
and 13.
let's do the Q&A.
Yeah. So one of the things we thought would just be fun would be kind of peeling back the curtain here on what we do for content creation and just talking a little bit about software we use, equipment we use, things that we do, creatively, like how we actually start to finish put something together. I don't know if everyone knows about this kind of stuff that we do or what kind of work goes into it, but it'd be kind of fun to spitball it. So, yeah, we want to talk a little bit about like how you content create, like what your setup is, what your process is, anything and all of it.
So in terms of like, I guess I'll start off with the software like for editing. So I use something called DaVinci Resolve, which it's actually you can get it for free. At least like the basic version. You can do like almost 99% of anything you need to do to make, YouTube videos with it within the free version. Um, but it's great. You can actually do color grading, you can do editing, you can do even effects work and things like that. Um, very, very powerful. So I kind of got into that, and I when I started content creation like over maybe 2 years ago or so, I knew nothing about any of these, and I kind of got into it because I wanted to learn that new skill, and I had some interest in like this stuff for a while. So that's kind of where I started off from. Aside from that, I use like Adobe Photoshop and kind of the tried and true like graphics creation software. Um, but yeah, those are probably the two main ones that I use.
I like it. Yeah, I'm pure Adobe. I've been using Photoshop for like 20 years at this point. I only started using Adobe Premiere once I needed to do software or video editing. That was actually one of the earliest things I wanted to do. One of my biggest pet peeves was trying to do a video in one take and either having awkward pauses or having to like stumble through words. And so one of my first goals is like I have to find a way to cut out all that like that dead air or me making a mistake. That to me is like a must at minimum, which uh, I don't want to shoot any shots here, but there's a couple content creators that don't do that, and it's a very personal pet peeve of mine watching content creators just kind of drone on and talk and have no bearing on the listening experience, if you will. I'll let you guys in chat kind of process. There's only like seven of us out there, so it can't be that hard to figure it out. But that is a big pet peeve of mine. And so when I do like my recording, I will sit in one take. Unfortunately, Adobe Premiere has like a sound bar where you can see the sound waves. So what I'll often do is like if I'm talking and I find myself needing to pause for a thought or I say something wrong, I'll like stop mid sentence. Then I can see the sound bar where the pause is, and I'll just like splice between the two, put them together, and then you kind of see like one big full cohesive speech um, throughout the rest of it. But yeah, Photoshop's been amazing though. I do that for my thumbnails. I do it for some of the graphics sparingly in my PowerPoints. I end up actually using a lot of Excel for that because that's how I present my stuff is through PowerPoint. I've looked for alternatives. They have some like oh my god, chat picked it out. Yeah, you guys are right. Um, where's it going with this? Oh, how to present stuff because there are alternative PowerPoint like softwares that just are visually more engaging. I just have never found any consistency with them though, so I've stayed like tried and true with PowerPoint, even though it doesn't look all that polished. But it's so simple, and I use it for work, so it's like second nature at this point.
I know at least for me, like in terms of my process, I'm very much a perfectionist. So like unfortunately, I just find myself spending so much time like creating all these graphics and then like going to town with like editing and trying to make things fancy that the whole process of me making a video just takes me hours or days, to actually put and produce one single video that maybe is 20 minutes long or 25 minutes or whatever it is. So unfortunately, I really have gotten to the point because of my issue and really being a perfectionist that I'm exhausted with creating those videos and at least with how I've done them. And I just haven't found a way to kind of get over that hump recently of how am I going to be in a place where I'm okay with putting out something that's more raw or unfiltered or not produced, so that I could get my thoughts out there, but not spend hours or days making it.
Yep.
So that's kind of where I am right now and why I have been less active with my videos. Um, so yeah, if anybody in the chat has ideas, I'm all ears, but I'm kind of trying to work through that myself.
Yeah, that's one of the toughest things that I had to do was like figure out a way to streamline how quickly I can get those things done. And that's why like when I have like an Excel sheet that's got all of our database of character stats and whatnot, and I just have like one chart that makes it really simple. Every time I need to do a new character, I just roll over my old PowerPoint. I copy and paste in a couple new images of the characters. I maybe move the icon on the graph a little bit, but everything is basically in a way that can be turned over pretty quickly. The things that take the longest, honestly, are the report card and the general thoughts and whatnot, because that does take rewriting from scratch. But the rest of it, at least, and Word of Calc, I've really on some occasions thought about like finding an alternative to how I paste some of the ability descriptions, because I think on yours you have like really great graphics of the translated effects, the modifier sizes, and Word of Calc has gone to the point that it's just a garbled mess half the time because of all the conditional buffs, and half of it's translated incorrectly. And there have been times where I've thought about like making my own version of like typing that stuff out, but it honestly would just like take too long that I just don't have the patience for that, even though it probably is a good value add to put it in a more digestible way to the viewer. God, it just that would amplify it by double the time.
I think like as a community, we some of us have to come together and try to make a push for Bismarck to update some of the latest effects and try to correct it that way, or maybe even rewrite some of the more confusing ones. But essentially since third anniversary, or since the fourth anniversary, even there's been maybe 5 to 10 new effects that are incorrectly translated or even completely missing from Word of Calc. Like you think about Farsplosion from Shrek is
Yes.
has a damage increases as she goes farther away. That's why it's called Farsplosion. But that a particular aspect of the modifier increase is not even listed on Word of Calc, and there's a couple others in there as well that are similar to that. So yeah, I'll probably try to put something together with 2PM and you and maybe a few others, and maybe we can have that effort to get it patched up.
Yeah. I know for myself, for like software, in terms of like actual like motion capture and whatnot, I'm still pretty caveman. I use like a just a Logitech camera that just like plops on top of my computer. I haven't really needed anything high def in particular, particularly because most of my videos are my tiny little face in the corner. This is probably as big as my face gets ever on any content that I do. And then even microphones. We were talking a couple weeks ago about me upgrading my microphone software because I had so many problems with it. My girlfriend actually had a physical stand microphone with a mic boom that I figured let me give that a test from when she was streaming. And I'll be honest, I actually don't like that. I was having a real big difficulty not only like angling it in a way that didn't intersect with the camera, but just the fact of like how my body position and how I sit, that all of a sudden I really had to like think about having this like microphone on my face somewhere and like how it captures. And it was pretty consistent, but it was actually kind of difficult because it's technically open mic. And so what I found was I would be picking up like car alarms going off outside of the train, and my girlfriend would sneeze, and like the microphone was so good it would pick it up because it's so open mic that I ended up defaulting still just to the good old fashioned like a headset. But I did entertain it. I wanted to do it, but in practice, it just couldn't get used to it.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of the audio, I mean, mine's all open mic, so like there's things you can do with the effects to kind of control some of that ambient noise with noise gate and other effects that kind of block out kind of lower frequency noises. Um, but yeah, I get it. I kind of built my whole streaming setup from the beginning. I kind of thought about it for a while, and I got like the lighting, and I got like a fancy camera, and so like I use like a Sony like DSLR for the camera, and
Yeah.
I've got like the mic and everything, and I've got it all positioned so that you don't really see where the mic is, but it's kind of right here.
Nice. Nice. Yep.
Um, but yeah, good
It's
stuff.
it's tough to think through. I still want to do something with my background here because it really is legit the good old fashioned fan that we meme on. Here's Squall for those that little action figure still hanging out. But I have entertained the green screen idea. I actually went to Home Depot last year and I got a bunch of like white hollow tubes because one of the things my girlfriend did in lieu of getting an actual green stand, which was kind of expensive considering I didn't know if I was going to do it, and I made a like with white tubes, a stand that you could drape over a green cloth, which we have the green screen. So I was debating trying to figure out a way to do that, and even then, just trying to find like some kind of ambient lighting or posters. I was actually going to print out some vision cards and posterize them and have them back here. I never pulled the trigger on it because it's still not very conducive to it, but I've always thought about that. I've never actually made the leap to like content creator atmosphere, if you know what I mean. It's me in my office.
I mean, you could even just put it on the back of your door or whatever, like, because like that's like really the backdrop behind you.
Actually, you're right. I mean, yeah, you probably would still sim this, but
Just
you're
put it
right.
right on the wall.
That's not a bad
You can't
idea.
get, I mean, it's okay if you see like whatever's behind you there, but
That's a good point. That's a good point. Yeah, but no, that's the fun of the content creation. I mean, I would still love to do more gameplay videos. I still would like to dabble in some more like live stream on Twitch and whatnot because there's really no exposure at all anywhere there. But I'm also at the point too that like I don't even know what I could do for gameplay content because a lot of it is I don't know, like just watching the game and a lot of button clicks that I don't know if that's entertaining to people or not. Maybe it is. I don't really know anyone that does like arena runs on a daily basis. Maybe that is fun for people to watch. I've thought about that. I've just never made it consistent. So for now, I'm just kind of like turning the wheel on like reviews and analysis on some things. But there definitely I think is a gap in the game for like gameplay related content that I haven't seen anyone really tap into recently. And I don't know if there's a need or
I
not.
think that's true because like I've seen it recently with Final Fantasy Tactics. There have been a number of new players have come in. I've seen them asking questions in the main chord. Um, So I think that that the veteran players maybe take some of that for granted, just doing basic things in the game, or even just like a daily cadence for what you should be doing for your daily quests. And like it's so ingrained in us at this point, like after 4 to 5 years playing the game, that we don't even think about that. But for them, it's like maybe a tall task of, okay, what do I do with my resources, or which events should I farm, or where in the far plane archive should I go first, or
Yep.
all these different things, or how do I counter the PvP teams that are out there? So there's plenty of content there. I think that you could do those kind of things. I've thought about it myself, but um, I think there is kind of a need for that in the community, especially with Orange and Massidia and some of those content creators that used to handle that segment of the audience that they've moved on.
That's exactly what prompted me to think about it when Oren retired. Because that was another thing. I'd never wanted to repeat content that was already being done. I've always wanted to bring my own personal touch and flair and insight. And if someone already covered something adequately, I never felt the need to duplicate that. If Oren J's got the patch release down, like I'll just tell people to go watch his channel. I don't need to say the same stuff he does. But um, you're right. Now that they're gone, there is kind of a need to still fill that. And I had thought about that. Like, how do we hit that more casual audience? And we even talked about making a website potentially. Like, there's a lot of like .gg, like really easy website builders. And I'm like, how hard would it be to make a website that's got our updated tier list on that would have like a 2 paragraph character review, like not even in depth, literally just a pure casual whatever, maybe some top 10 tips. Like, how hard is that? It's probably not that hard, but like you just got to start at the frame. You got to get that framework, which is the hardest part. Once you get it going, though, it's probably pretty easy. But yeah, that's all part of the like thoughts of the content creation.
I think at the end of the day, we're just two people, so there's only so many cycles that we have to do these things. So anybody in the chat, if you have been interested in content creation, there is a niche that could be filled in the audience that, you can get in there. Um, so give it a shot if it's something that's interesting to you.
Agreed. Agreed. All right. Well, I think that's all I wanted to mention about the Q&A there. Um, I actually think I would vote for passing on the other segment we were going to do. We were going to do a football draft back and forth. We'll
Let's
uh
do that next time.
yeah, I'll tease this for next time. We had set up a quick little team of like for those of you that know anything about American football, we're like, we tried to keep it similar to fantasy football, where you pick some of the mainstream positions, or like quarterback, running back, wide receiver. Who would we pick for more of the visions for each one of these positions? And JB and I were going to go back and forth. Like, you can't pick a unit twice, so we're just going to kind of go back and forth and fill out a team. But we are at the hour and a half, so although that's a fun segment, I don't know if it's worth making this video an hour and 45 or an hour or 2 hours long.
We'll do that next time.
Definitely. But This was a great discussion from everyone in chat tonight. I loved the comments and questions. I even think there's some that we weren't able to get to that hopefully we can put that in next week, maybe as another kind of hot take or whatever. But will sign off here. I know we'll likely get news in the next day or two. I need to double check the login days because that's usually a good indicator of when the news drops. But limited Guild Wars started today. Looks to be a okay one. You know our feelings on limited Guild War, but
I'm a little disappointed that it's just the same map that we were literally on for Guild War.
yeah,
I mean, it's different rule set or whatever because of the cost restriction, but it could have at least been a new map.
right, right.
So whatever.
Exactly. But that's it for now. Appreciate everyone being here. We'll be back next Monday night with hopefully some fun new updates. I know JP likely has some new stuff coming in for Jayden and that vision card, and who even knows what else they might bring in for fifth anniversary now. But thanks for joining us tonight. Enjoy the week. Good luck pulling whenever that happens, and we'll talk to y'all soon.